Hello YouTube, this is a Rotten Kumquat and welcome to Space Engineers. I just returned to the game and discovered that they finally implemented in-game programming and C# scripting. This is pretty awesome for me because I'm actually a software engineer in real life, so I thought I'd do a video or two or three or something showing how I would use this to help automate some of my stations or starships. I usually play on a dedicated server. It's down right now due to glitches with the dedicated server software. But this is the kind of stuff that I think is useful on a world that's persistent, that's up 24 hours a day, and that has stuff going on even when you're not online. So I'm going to step away from the junky yellow starter ship and create a station real quick. Basically what I'm going to show you is how you can use programming to sort and filter cargo. So in my example, if I were to come in on a mining ship, I could have the script actually sort stuff and dump it into the correct storage containers. Or if I have like a pirate ship where I've gone out, captured, say, that private sail there, ground it up or whatever, and I'm going to have all kinds of different ores and components and ingots and who knows what else. That way I'm not spending a whole bunch of time when I return to my base trying to OCD sort everything, get all my components in the right spot, get ores in the right spot, and so on. Maybe you're not as OCD as me and it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to throw a few important things here. Reactor antenna in case I get lost somehow. Gravity generator. Just a basic station. Now we're going to set up 4 small containers, and this is going to be our cargo bay. And I'm going to rename these for convenience. Now when you're working with the in-game scripting, the names are actually pretty important because that's how you're going to reference blocks for the most part. This one will be, if I could type, raw ore storage, ingot storage, component storage, and finally miscellaneous storage, or everything else. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to set up a connector, get a little conveyor system put together. And we're going to pretend this connector is used for docking to connect my station to, one of my fleet. And that when I deposit stuff from another starship, I'm going to deposit it into this connector, and we're going to want stuff to be sorted. I name that docking connector. So the goal is to have anything that enters this connector get sorted by the system and dumped into the correct cargo container over here. So let's get the programming blocks set up. And I'm going to put it right next to this. And we'll access this. Now I'm going to rename the programming block as well. I'm going to call it Inventory Manager. I imagine on a real station, I might have a whole bank of these that do different purposes. I might have one that does inventory management, another one that deals with refineries, one that does something with production, maybe one that does power management stuff and helps recharge batteries or shut down reactors when they're not needed, distribute fuel, all kinds of stuff like that. I've only been messing with the programming here since yesterday, so I'm sure some of you guys have come up with stuff I haven't even thought of yet. So a little bit about programming. I'll try to explain stuff as best I can. Like I said, I'm a software engineer in real life, so some of this is second nature to me, and I hope I don't leave anyone in the dust here or go too fast. If you have questions about stuff or you want me to explain something in more detail, just let me know in the comments here on YouTube, and I'll see what I can do to improve it. So I've got a blank code editor here. This is for that programming block. This is the program it will execute when it runs. And you're given a main function. This is called every time the program runs. Now you can also have other functions or classes outside of this for helper stuff, and I'm actually going to do a lot of that. I don't really like the API Space Engineers gives you to access stuff, which I understand it's in a very early state. Maybe it'll improve, but it seems kind of wordy to me. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create my own class, and I'm going to sort of create an API for this specific station. And it's going to have some properties and have some functions to access specific components of this station, you know, without so much blasted typing. I call it class my station, and then I'm actually going to paste this in. I have it outside in a text editor. I actually wrote this whole thing and tested it already, and now I'm just implementing it and recording it for you guys. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff here on my station. It's got properties for each of the things that we already created. We've got the raw ore container, refined material container, component container, mist container. Here's our connector. I'm maintaining a reference to the programmable block itself. I don't know if that'll be useful or not, but I figure anything that's named should have a reference on this. And here's a timer that I haven't placed yet, so ignore that. And we're not doing anything with the antenna, so I can take that out. So I have a constructor defined for this class, which needs access to the grid terminal system. It doesn't have direct access to the one that's defined in main, so it's got to be passed in. And it's using that to grab each of these blocks that I created by name and then store it in these properties defined above. And there's also a helper function that moves item stacks between two my inventory owner instances, which that could be cargo containers, could be refineries or assemblers. And right now, the only thing it does is it checks to make sure the destination container is not full. Here's the not at the front before transferring. Eventually, this could have stuff for load balancing or maybe determining, can I move the whole item stack in if it's only part of it? You know, what am I going to do? Change all that here, and I'm using this in a bunch of places up here. You know, fix it in one place, and everything that calls that function will automatically be fixed. So we're going to go up into main. Oh, I should mention, I want this to be an API for this station, and the station might eventually have a whole bunch of programmable containers. So my goal is to be able to take this class, I think my highlight just broke, take this class, and this would be basically copy and pasted into each programmable computer aboard the station. I don't know if there's any way to include or reference some kind of external script. If there is, that would definitely be the way to do that, so that this can be stored once somewhere and then referenced individually by each programmable computer, instead of me copy and pasting this into every computer, which would be a pain if I have to make changes to this, because then I have to fix it everywhere. But so far, this seems to be what I have to do. Now, anything outside of this class is specific to this computer, specific to its task. In this case, you know, sorting and dealing with cargo containers. Now, like I said before, main is run whenever. Let's save this real quick. The main function is executed whenever this block is told to run. So let's get started. This is me being a lazy programmer. I hate typing out grid terminal system over and over and over again, so I usually abbreviate it to a variable called GTS just to save some keystrokes. And then we've got this my station class defined. We're going to create an instance of it. And as defined before, the constructor needs a reference to the grid terminal system, which actually, my script here is a little out of date. I don't actually need that anywhere else, so we're going to do this and save a line of code. Now this is going to be a sorting function, so what we want it to do is to connect to the inventory of the docking connector and see what's in it. This is how you'd, in my case, I would get the inventory. You'll notice this takes a number, a numeric parameter. Some systems have multiple inventories. Refineries and assemblers have an input inventory and an output inventory, so you'd actually use a 0 or a 1 depending on which one you're connecting to. The connector and actually everything in this video only has one inventory, so it's always going to be 0. So we've got our inventory, and now we need to loop over and examine each item in it to see what it is. Now I'm actually looping over this in reverse. The reason is we're going to be modifying the inventory, and this is kind of a trick to make sure you're not screwing up your indexes or walking off the end of the inventory list. Start from the rear and work back to 0. Grab the current item, and now we're gonna check its type, see what it is. I've defined 4 categories already. We've got ore, ingots, components, and everything else. And I was through some trial and error debugging, basically looking at the items, trying to dump some of their properties into an antenna, and then looking at the antenna in my HUD to see what it says. I was able to figure out how to actually find these categories. It has a type ID enum of some kind. If you cast it to a string, you actually get something fairly useful. And this text editor is kind of screwy right now. These names are probably subject to change. Obviously, this is an early feature in Space Engineers. It wouldn't surprise me if next week's update breaks this script completely. You never know, and it's an early access game. I think it's still early access, so don't be surprised when this stuff changes and you got to figure it all out again. So I'm doing a switch statement on this type ID. What I found experimentally is anything that's OR is called a myObjectBuilder_OR. So we're going to find those. And if this item is OR, we want to move it from the connector to the OR storage. Now I've got a helper function I'm going to define to save me a little bit of typing on that. I found when I was first developing this, I was typing this a lot. So we're going to use that helper function defined on the MyStation class. Move item stack, and anything that's, where we're moving the inventory has to be my inventory owner. So we got to cast the input connector. This function is always going to move from the input connector. It's going to move inventory from the input connector to our destination cargo container at the specified index in the source, in the connector. So if it's OR, what we're going to do, move to container. The destination is going to be the station dot, what's it called? Raw ore container. And the index is just our current position within the inventory, so I. And C#, you end a switch statement with break, or a case with break. Check code, make sure it compiles. Surprise, I didn't typo somehow. Remember and exit, and we're going to test this real quick. So what we're going to do, I'm going to spawn a couple items here. I'm Gonna grab some cobalt ore. And we'll do a couple different kinds, just to make sure. We'll put some cobalt ingots in as well. Now it shouldn't, we didn't set it up to handle that yet, but it's good to check for that. Nickel ore, a couple different kinds of ore. And we'll throw a stack of computers in. Go to our connector, docking connector, and I'm just going to dump my entire inventory in there. Creative modes, I really don't need these tools on me. So now if I run this script, I'm going to open up the control panel on it, click run, and nothing errored out. If something goes wrong, you'll see an exception here. There's no stack trace or line numbers, so it's kind of painful debugging. But the script ran. We're going to go back to our inventory, take a look. And look, our raw ore storage container has the nickel and cobalt ore. And everything else stayed in the docking connector. So far, so good. Now we're going to reset this, put everything back in the docking connector. I don't know why I can't click control panel anymore. There we go. Go back to our script. And we're going to add another category here. The next one, we're going to do ingots. And just like above, we're going to move it to a container. But instead of moving it to the raw ore container this time, let me double check the name. We're going to refined material container. That's what I named the property. Compile it, make sure it works, save it. Double check our inventory. We've got everything in the docking connector. Let's go back to our inventory manager, run it, and let's see how our inventory looks. The ores went back to raw ore storage, just like we want, and the cobalt ingots went into ingot storage, just like we want. Everything else stayed in the docking connector because it doesn't know what to do with it yet. Next condition. Components. This should handle all the stuff that you produce from an assembler. Computers, power cells, iron plates, or whatever they call it, steel plates. Let me double check that property name. It's called component container. Remember an exit. Gonna reset our inventory. Put everything back in the docking connector. Go back to the control panel, run the inventory manager, and let's take a look. Computers went under components. Cobalt ingots went to ingot storage, and the raw ores went just where we want them. So far, so good. All these tools, and actually maybe my miscellaneous category should just be called tools. Might take some experimentation to confirm that. You know, I'll throw a whole bunch of stuff in and see where they go, but all the tools remained in the docking connector because it doesn't know what to do with it yet. And apparently messing with this okay, there's something weird with the scroll bar. So we're going to go back to our programmable block and we're going to add one last condition in here. And we're just going to do default. What this does in C#, this is a switch statement. If you're not familiar with that, it's kind of a shorthand way to perform an action based on a value without doing if this equals this, else if this equals this, else if this equals this. It's a little bit shorter. So we're switching on the type ID, and depending on the case, that's the action we're going to take. Well, you can set one up called default. And what that does is if none of these are hit, the default one will run. So this is just going to catch everything else that we haven't defined a special rule for. And what we're going to do is move whatever doesn't fit the above rules into the miscellaneous container. And let's reset our inventory and test that. So we got everything back in the docking connector. Go back to the control panel, run it. Let's check our inventory. Never thought I'd be doing regression testing in a video game. Raw ores are where they need to be, ingots are where they need to be, components are where they need to be, and all the tools went into miscellaneous storage. And the docking connector is now completely empty. So our little sort function works. Now it only works... Apparently I have to scroll up to be able to click control panel. That's... If I'm scrolled down here, the control panel button doesn't work. Now that's still a manual process. Someone has to go in here and click run. Now that's not a huge issue if I'm, showing up and depositing a bunch of stuff from, say, my miner or a transport or a freighter of some kind. But what if someone else is dumping stuff off and they don't have permissions to access my base? But I said, yeah, if you got some stuff you want to drop off, go ahead and do it. They wouldn't be able to run this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a timer block, and we're going to make this program run continuously. Take this timer, and I'm just going to set it up right next to it. I'm looking for the little blue control panel, and I guess the preview doesn't show it. Okay, I gotta turn it one more to the right. And actually, I'm gonna tilt that too. There it is. Now it's upside down. Sorry, being OCD. So here's a timer block. Now what the timer block does, if you're unfamiliar, is you can set up a delay, and when the delay has expired, it will perform some actions. So if we set up the action, I'm going to tell it to use the inventory manager block and run it. And then we're going to rename this too, so that we know exactly what this timer block is for. Because if I have a whole bunch of computers doing different stuff, they might all run on a timer, and maybe they run on different timers. So I like to name the timer so that we know what it's going to do. Now, instead of 10 seconds, just for the sake of testing, we're going to drop it to 1 second. That means when it's triggered, it's going to wait a second and then do something. And you can set that to whatever is useful. Just be aware, I don't know what kind of performance implications this has yet, but if you're playing on someone's dedicated server, you might not want to do 1 second. You might want to do 10 seconds or 30 seconds or a minute, or looks like this goes all the way up to an hour. So if you have stuff that you want to make sure it occasionally runs, you can do that. Set it for an hour. I'm going to set it for 1 second just so we can tell. If I start it, it should have run, which let's reset our inventory and try that just to make sure. Looks like everything is sorted as it should be. Go back to our control panel, find the timer, start it, and if we flip back to the inventory real quick, there it went. But it still is a manual process, only runs once. So that is why, if I go back and edit the script, my station class has a reference to the timer that's set up in the construction, or the constructor here. So what we're actually going to do then is at the end of our main function is we're going to queue that timer up, tell it to start, and it's going to run perpetually because of that. We've got to get the action name. Get action with name, and it's called start. And we're going to apply that back to the inventory timer. So now it's going to, when the timer ticks, it's going to call main here. It's going to do all this stuff. It's going to sort our inventory, and then it's going to start the timer again. So it should run perpetually at whatever interval we set. In this case, 1 second. On an actual server, I might do something like a minute. Now it needs something to trigger it the first time. So we can either start the timer or we can execute the script. Either will do it. If I run that, now you'll notice the timer's blinking through its 1 second cycle. So now it's running continuously. We should be able to go play with the inventory and see that. So I moved this nickel ore up into the docking connector, and it got put right back into raw ore storage. Do ingots, and you get the point. We've got a very basic automatic sorting system here. So, pretend this docking connector, instead of dumping right into the middle of my station, was, sticking out this way a ways on the end of some kind of boom. And I pulled up with one of my starships. I could, dock it, connect it to this connector, take whatever I need to get off my starship, put it in that connector, and this computer on my station will put it where it needs to be for me, completely automatically. So that's about all what I wanted to show today. Hope that was interesting and useful. And if you need me to clarify or go into more detail on anything, just let me know. I'll probably find a way to host this the code that I have so far up on Steam Workshop, or I don't know, just throw in the YouTube description or something. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.